Kiera Collins didn't expect her day to start with frosting in her hair and a last-minute delivery to the tallest skyscraper in Manhattan, but here she was balancing a triple-tiered blackberry cream cake in her arms, her apron dusted with powdered sugar, riding a gold-trimmed elevator to the penthouse floor of ZaneTech Enterprises. "This better be worth the tip," she muttered under her breath, adjusting the cake box as the elevator chimed and the doors slid open to reveal sleek marble floors, glass walls, and a receptionist who looked like she hadn't blinked since the stock market opened. "You're here for Mr. Branson Zeller?" the woman asked, eyeing the cake like it might explode. "I guess." The note just said, "Surprise delivery for BZ. And this is the address." The receptionist pressed a button on her headset. "Sir, there's a cake here." A pause. Then, "Send it in." Kiera blinked. "Wait, just like that? No ID check. No security dogs. This is way too easy." The woman didn't answer, only gestured toward a frosted glass door at the end of the corridor. Kiera pushed it open slowly, stepping into what looked more like a luxury suite than an office. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city like a throne room. A single man stood in front of them, back turned, hands in his pockets. "Hi," she said, lifting the cake slightly. "I have a delivery for Mr. Zeller." He turned around, and holy hell, he looked like he stepped out of a luxury watch ad. Tall, tailored navy suit, dark hair brushed back, sharp jawline you could balance a platter on. His eyes landed on her, pausing for a second longer than necessary. "You're not the usual courier." "I'm not usually the courier," she replied, setting the cake down on the black marble table. "My assistant called out, and it was either bring it myself or risk it getting dropped by a teenager on a bike." He walked over, inspecting the cake. Blackberry cream with lemon sponge and a vanilla bean buttercream. Custom order. No note though, which is weird. But hey, cake's cake. His brow lifted. "You made this. Baked it? Boxed it? Nearly got hit by a taxi delivering it, so yeah." He chuckled, and the sound made her knees wobble slightly. "Well, whoever sent it, they have impressive taste." He opened the box carefully and pulled out a small card tucked into the edge. Reading it, his expression shifted, his smile fading into something unreadable. "It's from my board," he said finally. "Apparently, it's the anniversary of my first acquisition. They think cake will make me sentimental." "You don't strike me as a cake for sentimental value kind of guy," she said before she could stop herself. He laughed again, this time more freely. "I'm not. But this might convert me." There was a pause between them long enough for her to notice the quiet hum of the city below, the way the sunlight caught the cufflinks on his sleeves, the fact that he hadn't looked away from her even once. "I'm Kiera, by the way. I own Sugar Loop Bakery. We're a small place in Soho." "Branson Zeller," he said, offering his hand. "CEO of this madhouse." She shook it and instantly regretted it. His grip was warm, firm, and lingered just long enough to make her stomach flutter. "Well, I should get going," she said, stepping back. "Lots more sugar to swirl." "Wait," he said, and she paused. Would you have a minute to try a slice with me?" She blinked. "You want me to eat cake with you? Now?" He looked almost sheepish. "It's either that or I eat it alone in silence like a sad cliché in a corner office." "You'd be doing a public service." Kiera hesitated. Her brain screamed no, this wasn't part of her plan. Deliver, leave, bake more. But the way he looked at her like she was the only thing in the room that wasn't made of chrome and glass made her nod. "All right," she said, "but only one slice. I still have 2 wedding cakes to finish." He pulled out a small silver knife from a drawer because of course billionaires had silver cake knives in their office and cut 2 neat slices. They sat on the leather sofa near the window, the skyline stretching out behind them as if they were suspended in the clouds. "This is good," he said after his first bite. "Like dangerously good." "Dangerous is kind of my brand," she said with a grin. "I've caused 3 food comas this year." He laughed again. "Do you always charm your clients like this?" "Only the ones who don't yell at me for being 5 minutes late." "Well, then I'm honored." Their eyes met again, and something shifted like the air between them had thickened, humming with something electric. Kiera cleared her throat and stood up. Okay, I really do have to go. Enjoy the rest of the cake, Mr. Zeller. Branson, he corrected. And, would it be completely out of line if I said I'd like to see you again? She blinked. As in, another cake delivery? No, he said, standing too. As in, dinner. With me. She stared at him. A man like him, powerful, rich, intimidatingly put together, asking her, the bakery girl with flowers still on her jeans, to dinner? You don't even know me. That's why I'm asking. Kiera hesitated. I don't mix business with, this isn't business. Her breath caught in her throat. She should say no. She should walk away. But instead, she smiled. One dinner, she said. And only if you promise not to order dessert at the restaurant. He smiled back, slow, sure. Deal. As she rode the elevator back down, her heart thudded against her ribs like a drumline. She had no idea what just happened, but she had a feeling it was the start of something big. The next evening, Kiera stood outside a restaurant she'd only ever seen in glossy spreads about celebrity sightings and Michelin stars. Fleur de Sel shimmered with warm amber light behind floor-to-ceiling windows, its name carved into the marble in delicate script. She smoothed her coat, suddenly hyper-aware of the flour-dusted vans double-parked across the street, of her plain black heels that had seen one too many kitchen spills. The hostess greeted her immediately like she'd been waiting. Miss Collins? Kiera nodded, surprised. Mr. Zeller is expecting you. Right this way. Inside, the restaurant was hushed and opulent, with crystal sconces and waiters that moved like dancers. Branson stood as she approached the table. He wore a slate gray suit, open at the collar this time, the fabric catching the low light like a whisper. She wished she didn't notice how everyone turned to look when he smiled at her. You look. He stopped himself, then offered a softer, more careful, I'm glad you're here. She sat, still adjusting to everything. I almost didn't come. Why? Because I spent the last 4 hours trying to find a dress that didn't have powdered sugar embedded in the seams. He laughed. But it was quieter tonight. Less performative, more real. Do you always bake until the last minute? I have to. We're short-staffed right now. One of my decorators left to open her own place, and I haven't had a proper day off in 3 weeks. Why not hire someone new? I've tried. But most people either want to skip straight to wedding cakes or can't tell the difference between genoise and sponge. Is there a difference? A huge one, she said, leaning forward. You'd be amazed how many people think eggs are optional until you serve them a brick. He smiled again, but this time it didn't feel like he was humoring her. It felt like he was genuinely listening. The waiter arrived, slipping a menu in front of her. Branson didn't touch his. I already ordered for us. I hope that's all right. She raised an eyebrow. Bold move. I called the chef. Told him to surprise us. He owes me for helping him secure a liquor license last year. Kiera leaned back. You call that pulling strings or just being a culinary matchmaker? I call that knowing what I want. The way he said it, measured, confident without arrogance, sent a shiver through her. She looked away, focusing on the candle between them. I'm not used to this, she said quietly. To what? Being courted. Whatever this is. He didn't flinch or laugh. It's dinner, right? With the most powerful man I've ever met. That's not how I want you to see me. She lifted her eyes, meeting his. Then how should I see you? Someone who's been watching the clock all day, hoping you'd show up. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was weighted, full. Their food arrived, delicate dishes plated like artwork. Duck with fig glaze, truffle risotto, a side of roasted endive. Kiera took a bite and closed her eyes. Okay, I take it back. You can order for me anytime. He grinned. That's a dangerous promise. They ate slowly, the conversation shifting into easier territory, his travel disasters. Her worst bridezillas. The time she dropped an entire sheet cake because a pigeon startled her on delivery. He didn't interrupt or steer the conversation back to himself. He just listened, his gaze never straying. When the plates were cleared, the waiter returned with a small dish, no dessert, just a single white flower resting in a glass bowl. "For the lady," he said, and slipped away. Kiera blinked. "That's not edible." Branson leaned in slightly. "It's a gardenia." "I asked them to find one." "Why?" "You mentioned once you hated roses. Said they were overused and scentless." She stared at him, startled. "I said that weeks ago. To a customer. You weren't even in the bakery. I was waiting for my order. You were arguing with someone about bouquet toppers. You remember that?" His expression didn't change. "I remember a lot of things." There it was again, that quiet intensity that made her feel seen in a way that was both terrifying and magnetic. She reached for the check instinctively, but he stopped her with a glance. "No, I can pay for my half. This isn't a transaction. It's an evening I invited you to. Still, let me do this." Kiera hesitated, then nodded, unsure whether to feel flattered or out of her depth. Outside, the city had softened into night. Branson walked beside her, not rushing, not checking his phone. When they reached the corner, he paused. "Can I drive you home? I'm 5 blocks away." "I'll walk." "I'd rather not let you walk alone." She hesitated. "You always this insistent?" "Only when it matters." Against her better judgment, she agreed, and he led her to a sleek black car parked discreetly a few doors down. The interior smelled faintly of leather and something crisp she couldn't name. The ride was quiet at first. "Then you're not like the people I usually meet," he said. "I could say the same. I mean it. There's no angle with you. No pretense. That's because I'm exhausted and have frosting in my bag." He laughed, then paused. "I've spent years surrounded by people who only tell me what they think I want to hear. With you, it's different." Kiera looked out the window. Different can be temporary. It doesn't have to be. The car slowed in front of her building. She turned to him. "Thank you. For dinner. And the flower." He didn't move, didn't lean in, didn't push. "I'd like to see you again," he said softly. She hesitated. "I'll think about it." He nodded once. "Fair." Then she slipped out, walked to her door, and didn't look back until she was inside. From her window, she watched the car pull away, and only then let herself exhale. Kiera hadn't intended to see him again so soon. But 2 days later, a black envelope was slid under the door of her bakery before opening. No name, no logo, just her name handwritten in clean, unfussy script. Inside was an invitation. Heavy cardstock, gold edging, and a single line, black tie. 8 o'clock. Friday. I'll be waiting. No address. Just a crisp metal tag clipped to the corner, engraved with a 6-digit code and the word Elysian. She stared at it for a full 10 minutes before realizing her assistant, Nora, was leaning over her shoulder. "Are you being recruited into a secret billionaire society?" Nora asked, wide-eyed. "Because if so, I'm going with you." "I think it's an invitation," Kiera said, still trying to get her pulse to slow. "From him." "Let me get this straight," Nora said, grabbing 2 espresso cups without looking. "You go on one date with the guy, and now you're being summoned like a Bond girl to some mystery gala?" "I don't even know where this place is," Kiera muttered. Nora tapped her phone. "Elysian, Midtown. It's not a place, it's a rooftop club. Members only. No website. No phone. You get in with a code." "That seems excessive." "That seems rich," Nora corrected. Friday arrived before Kiera felt remotely prepared. She'd borrowed a dress from her sister, a sleek black column with a high neck and low back, and paired it with heels she hadn't worn since her cousin's wedding. By the time the car Branson sent pulled up, her palms were damp and her throat dry. The building was discreet. No signage. Just a valet who took one look at her and held open the door. Inside, a private elevator required the metal tag. When the doors opened, she stepped into another world. The rooftop was enclosed in glass, with a retractable ceiling revealing the night sky. Live strings played softly in the background. Waiters in white tuxedos drifted through the space with trays of champagne. The skyline glittered around her like spilled diamonds. And then she saw him standing near a balcony, in a jet-black tuxedo that fit like it had been tailored with a scalpel. He turned before she could call his name, as if he'd felt her arrive. "You look." His voice trailed off, but his gaze didn't. "Appropriately out of place?" she offered. His mouth lifted, not quite a smile. "Perfect." A waiter appeared with a glass of champagne. She took it, grateful for something to hold. "You didn't say what this was for," she said, following him as he led her toward a quieter corner near the glass edge. "I wanted to show you something." She followed his gaze. Across the rooftop, a temporary installation had been set up, a series of miniature cakes, each under its own glass dome, arranged like an art exhibit. There were handwritten cards beside each one. "I told the chef here to recreate your flavors," he said. "I brought in your menu from the bakery. Let him pick what inspired him." She blinked. "You did all this?" "Why?" "Because I wanted to see your work in a space like this," he said. "Because it deserves to be seen." She walked slowly to the first dome. A delicate lavender sponge with honey mousse. She'd only made it once for a spring garden wedding that had nearly been rained out. The next was a bourbon maple glaze over pecan chiffon. Then her signature midnight chocolate with sea salt ganache. "You remembered all these?" "I don't forget what matters." She stared at the third card. It had her name on it. And below it, one sentence: "Baking is how I speak when words aren't enough." Her handwriting. From a chalkboard sign she kept behind the counter. "You copied that," she whispered. "I photographed it. The first day I came in." She turned to him, heart thudding. "Why?" "Because I knew I'd want to remember the person who wrote it." The music shifted, softened into something slower. Couples moved onto the glass dance floor that shimmered beneath their feet. He held out a hand. "I don't dance," she said instantly. "Neither do I," he replied. "Let's not dance together." She laughed despite herself and took his hand. They moved onto the floor, awkward for half a beat and then not at all. He didn't lead like someone trying to impress. He just held her like he didn't want to let go. Close enough to speak without raising their voices. Close enough to feel the quiet inhale he took every time she looked up at him. "You do this for all your bakery girls?" she asked, not quite teasing. "I've never done this for anyone." "Not even the gardenia?" That was the beginning. A pause. "I don't know what this is," she said finally. "You and me. It doesn't make sense." "Does it have to?" "It feels fast. I move fast." She looked up. "Does that mean you lose interest fast, too?" Something in his expression shifted. Not guilt. Not offense. Something older. Wound deep. "I don't lose interest," he said. "But I've learned people leave. Sometimes when you want them most." The music swelled. She leaned in slightly, not touching, but near enough to feel the weight of that confession. "I'm not good at this," he added. "Not real things. I don't need perfect," she said. "I need honest." He looked at her like she'd said something he hadn't heard before. They danced until the music faded. Until the rooftop was nearly empty. Until the sky above them blinked with stars. When he walked her to the waiting car, he didn't kiss her. Just brushed her hand with his fingers as if memorizing the shape. Inside, she sat with the door closed, watching him through the window. He didn't move until the car pulled away. And she didn't stop thinking about the look in his eyes for the rest of the night. On Monday morning, Kiera stood in the back of her bakery's kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hairpinned in a hasty twist, barely registering the low hum of the oven as she stared down at a tray of cooling lemon tarts. Her hands weren't steady. She'd over-whipped the cream, and the glaze on the raspberry coulis had already begun to set unevenly. She hadn't seen Branson since the rooftop. Not because he hadn't tried. He'd sent a bouquet of wildflowers, actual wildflowers, not roses or lilies, not anything that came in tight plastic sleeves. She'd found them in a hand-thrown ceramic vase, delivered before opening hours with a note that read only, "Tell me how you like your coffee." She hadn't responded. Not because she didn't want to, but because she wasn't sure she could trust what she wanted anymore. "Hey," Nora called from the storefront. "You might want to see this." Kiera wiped her hands, stepped through the swinging door, and stopped cold. The front window of Sugar Loop was flanked by a sleek black SUV. Not parked illegally. Not blocking anything. Just unmistakably expensive. And standing in front of it, holding a paper cup in one hand and a box in the other, was Branson. He wore a navy wool coat buttoned high, a soft gray scarf tucked neatly beneath the collar. No cameras. No entourage. Just him. "I brought coffee," he said when she opened the door. "And a cinnamon cruller from that place uptown you mentioned once. Took me 45 minutes to get through the line." Kiera didn't move. "Why are you here?" "Because you disappeared." "I didn't disappear. I've been working. And avoiding me." Her jaw tightened. "Branson, this isn't a game. I don't have time for rooftop exhibitions and secret clubs. I don't live in that world." He stepped forward. "I didn't bring you into that world to impress you. I brought you into it because I wanted you to see what you look like in it. And you belonged there." She shook her head. "That's not real. That's curated. You're used to people who orbit around your life. I'm not a satellite." "Good," he said. "Because I'm tired of orbiting. I want gravity." The words knocked the wind out of her. He looked down at the pastry box in his hand. "I've been thinking a lot about why you matter to me. It's not just because you're honest or sharp or because you say things like Jane was with your whole chest. It's because when I'm around you, I'm not calculating. I'm not strategizing. I'm just me." Kiera folded her arms. "And what happens when being yourself isn't enough?" "I don't want perfect," he said. "I want something real. And I'm willing to fight for it." She hesitated. The air between them shifted, not tense, but heavy with something unspoken. "I'm scared," she admitted finally. "So am I," he said without hesitation. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." She stepped back, opened the door wider. "Come inside," she said. "The coffee here is better." He followed her in, and everything after that moved fast. Not rushed, just clear. Within a week, he showed up at the bakery every morning before work, always with something new: a box of fresh rhubarb from a farmer's market at dawn, a vintage cake stand he'd found in an antique shop in Tribeca, a small sketch of her storefront someone had done in charcoal. He never stayed long. Just enough to say good morning, enough to brush her hand, enough to leave her smiling without realizing it. She didn't question it anymore. She didn't need to. The shift came quietly, one Thursday evening, when they were sitting on the floor of her apartment sharing takeout from worn cartons. Her laptop opened beside them as she balanced next week's orders. "You know," he said, leaning back against the foot of her couch, "I think I've had more fun eating lo mein on your floor than I ever had at a gala. That's because you didn't spill soy sauce on your sock." He grinned, then paused, watching her. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about building something." She looked up. "Like a new company?" "No," he said. "Like a life. With someone who makes me feel like the world isn't just transactions." She set her carton down. "Branson, I'm not proposing," he said quickly. "Not yet. But I want you to know I'm not here for a season. I'm here for the whole damn calendar." There was no dramatic music. No sweeping gesture. Just truth. And it was enough. That Sunday, he showed up at the bakery again, this time with 3 men in suits and a folded set of architectural plans. "What is this?" she asked, wiping flour from her palms. He gestured to the rolled-up papers. "Expansion. You've outgrown this place." She blinked. "You're offering to buy me a new building?" "No," he said. "I'm offering to invest. As a partner. Silent if you want, or involved if you'll let me. But only on one condition." She raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "That you keep the name." She stared at the plans, then at him, then slowly shook her head. "I don't want a bigger bakery," she said. His expression faltered. "I want a second one." Silence. Then he laughed, full and unguarded. "Ambitious," he said. "Do you have something against ambition?" "Not when it's this beautiful." That spring, they opened Sugar Loop 2 in the West Village. Smaller, cozier, but every inch of it hers. He was there for the ribbon cutting, Standing behind her with one hand on her waist and the other holding the ceremonial scissors she insisted on decorating with edible glitter. He never hovered, never tried to take over, just supported quietly, completely. They didn't rush anything. But when he asked her to come with him to Italy for a week to meet a family-run patisserie that had been in business since the 1800s, she said yes without hesitation. And when he leaned in on the cobblestone street outside that tiny Florentine cafe, looked at her like he couldn't imagine another morning without her, and asked if she wanted forever, she didn't hesitate then either. Yes, she whispered, but only if you promise not to ever buy roses. Never, he said, pulling a single gardenia from his coat pocket and tucking it behind her ear. The sky above them was the color of warm milk, and the bells from the nearby cathedral rang out like icing on the moment. Everything about it was simple. And completely right. The first morning they woke up together in Tuscany, the windows were open and the linen curtains swayed in the breeze like they had something to say. Kiera sat at the edge of the bed, brushing out her hair, staring out at the rolling hills painted in soft golds and greens. The scent of cypress and sun-warmed grapes drifted in through the open shutters. Branson came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. His voice was quiet, still thick with sleep. "You didn't answer me last night." "I did," she said, reaching up to touch his hand. "Technically, yes. But you said yes and then immediately asked me if I was hiding a ring in my sock." She laughed, leaning her head back against him. "That was a valid question. I'll take that as a yes to everything then." She turned to face him. "I said yes to you. That's everything." Later that day, they drove through winding country roads in a vintage olive-green convertible Branson had rented from a retired racing driver who only accepted cash and wine. They stopped at a roadside stand run by a woman who sold homemade jam and told fortunes with olive pits. Kiera bought a jar of apricot and rosemary and let the woman tell her she would soon be very lucky in love. Branson gave her a look. "I think she's a little late to that party." Kiera dipped her finger in the jam and pressed it to his lips. "You're impossible. You're marrying me," he said. Still deciding if that's a brilliant move or a total gamble. "I promise to make it the best bet you ever placed." They returned home a week later to a mountain of emails, unfinished orders, and a very frazzled Nora who declared she would never, ever let them leave for that long again unless she was given at least one spa voucher and a week's notice. Kiera kissed her on the cheek, handed her a bottle of limoncello, and declared her a saint. Branson disappeared into meetings for 2 days, and when he reemerged, he handed Kiera a key. "This is for the brownstone in Brooklyn. The one you said had the perfect light for decorating." She glanced up at him. "What is this?" "A space for your next idea," he said. "Or ours. I didn't ask you to buy it." "I know. You don't need to ask." "You're not trying to impress me?" "No. I'm trying to build with you. There's a difference." She held the key in her palm, the weight of it both literal and not. "Then I think it's time you met my father." Branson blinked. "I didn't realize that was part of the expansion plan." She smiled. "If you want this to stick, you should know where I come from." They drove upstate that weekend to a small town where the streets were lined with old stone buildings and the bakery where Kiera had first learned to make pie crusts sat proudly on the corner with chipped paint and a bell that jingled when you walked in. Her father, George, was a broad-shouldered man with a gruff voice and a limp from an old factory accident. He had flour permanently embedded in the creases of his fingers and a habit of pretending he didn't care even when he clearly did. Branson shook his hand firmly. "It's good to finally meet you." George looked him over, then turned to Kiera. "He's too clean. You're gonna have to rough him up a little." Branson didn't flinch. "I've been roughed up by worse." George gave a slow nod, then handed him an apron. "Let's see how he folds dough." Branson spent the next 2 hours elbow deep in flour, laughing when George barked at him to stop overworking the crust and swearing under his breath when he burned the first batch of apple turnovers. Kiera watched from the counter, arms crossed, heart full. She hadn't seen her father laugh like that in years. When they finally sat down in the back room with mugs of cider and fresh scones, George turned to Branson. "She's stubborn, and she gets quiet when she's really hurt. Don't mistake that for weakness." "I won't." Branson said. She'll always choose what's right over what's easy. I know. George studied him for a long moment. Then you've got my blessing. Just don't screw it up. Back in the car, Kiera leaned her head on Branson's shoulder. He likes you. He called me soft. That was affection. Branson kissed the top of her head. Then I'll take all the affection I can get. They planned the wedding for spring in the orchard where her parents were married. It wasn't extravagant. No ballrooms, no fireworks, no imported orchids. Just soft lanterns strung between trees, long tables with linen runners, and a single cake she made herself, almond sponge with elderflower cream and pressed lavender petals. Branson wore a deep charcoal suit, no tie, and waited under an arch of woven branches. His mother cried through the entire ceremony, and Branson didn't stop staring at Kiera from the moment she appeared until long after the vows were spoken. I never pictured this, she whispered as they danced beneath the stars that night. Pictured what? A life that felt this much like mine, and still this full of someone else. He touched her cheek. Then we did something right. They bought the brownstone together, turned the garden into a greenhouse for edible flowers, opened a test kitchen on the lower level where Kiera began teaching weekend baking classes. Branson set up an office upstairs but rarely used it, preferring to work from the kitchen island while she experimented with new flavor pairings. They fought sometimes over clutter, over scheduling, over which Netflix series to binge, but they always came back to the same place. The same foundation built not on grand gestures but on quiet ones, a cup of chamomile left on the nightstand, a note scribbled on a napkin during a late-night brainstorm, a hand slipped into the others during a long walk home. 2 years later, on a warm spring morning, Kiera stood in the new bakery's backroom, humming to herself as she tied the last ribbon on a box. Branson walked in holding a tiny pair of navy blue baby shoes. You think they'll fit? He asked, smiling as he held them up. She took them, pressed a hand to her stomach. Eventually. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. I hope they inherit your stubbornness, he said. And your refusal to ever quit. They'll be unstoppable, he whispered. And very well fed. They stood together in the quiet morning light, surrounded by the scent of vanilla and lemon zest, the soft hum of the ovens warming, and the sound of the city waking beyond the window. It wasn't perfect. It was better. It was theirs. Forever.